Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Authorities in Webster Parish, Louisiana say that they are investigating the aftermath of a truly tragic and shocking case this week, after a former local mayor and his adult daughter were allegedly gunned down by an 11-year-old family member. The situation began at around 6:30 a.m. on September 1st, when police in the city of Minden were called to a residence on the 100 block of Austin Street with reports of a shooting. They arrived to find two victims, later identified as 82-year-old Joe Cornelius Sr. and his 31-year-old daughter Keisha Miles. Sadly, both were pronounced dead at the scene. Officers spoke with another adult at the home, who allowed police to interview the 11-year-old suspect. According to investigators, at first the boy gave them a story that made no sense, though eventually he admitted to shooting both of the victims. Two guns were later found hidden at the property, both of which are believed to have been used in the crime. The 11-year-old was arrested and is now facing 2 counts of first-degree murder. So far, the boy's identity has not been released due to his age, though authorities have said that he is a family member of the 2 deceased victims. A motive also hasn't been confirmed, though neighbors who spoke to reporters stated that they had overheard an argument between Cornelius and the 11-year-old shortly before shots were fired at the house. They say that the argument might have been about credit card charges for video games. People across the city of Minden are now struggling to process the awful tragedy, which has gained added publicity owing to the fact that Cornelius was a longtime city councilor and at one point served as an interim mayor. The 82-year-old was well liked in the community, where he was known as the Ice Cream Man for handing out frozen treats to kids in the summer. Many others simply knew him as Mr. Joe. At the time of this recording, the situation is still developing. A Wisconsin university community is mourning the tragic loss of a talented student athlete this week, after she was fatally gunned down at her off-campus apartment just days before the start of her senior year. The situation began shortly before midnight on August 30th, when police in the city of Whitewater were called to an apartment complex on the 100 block of West Whitewater Street. Officers arrived to find a 21-year-old woman, later identified as Kara Welsh, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Sadly, she was pronounced dead a short time later. Witnesses told authorities that in the lead up to the shooting, Kara had been involved in an altercation with a 23-year-old man named Chad Richards. The nature of that altercation is unclear at this time, though what we do know is that Richards is now accused of killing her. The 23-year-old was arrested at the scene and is now expected to face charges including first-degree intentional homicide, endangering safety by the use of a dangerous weapon, and disorderly conduct while armed. News of Kara's death prompted an outpouring of grief not only from heartbroken friends and family members, but from the broader University of Wisconsin Whitewater community, where she was a student. The 21-year-old was a prominent member of the school's gymnastics team, who have now listed her many achievements in a statement following her death. According to the university, Kara was a national champion and 2-time All-American, one who held 4 of the top 8 scores recorded in the history of the program. At the time of her death, Kara was reportedly days away from beginning her senior year at the school, where she was pursuing a Bachelor's of Business Administration with a sports management emphasis. While little additional information has currently been released about the connection between Kara and her alleged killer, it's said that the two knew each other and may have been in a relationship, and that Richards was a former member of the university wrestling team. According to local media, he was also a student at the school at the time of the incident. The 23-year-old remains in custody, and the investigation continues. Representatives from South Carolina's Myrtle Beach Police Department released a tragic update in a more than 2-year-old missing persons case this week, announcing that the 51-year-old woman had been found dead on a property she once shared with her boyfriend, and that he has now been arrested and charged in connection with the case. The case began back in May of 2022, when police received a call from the brother of 51-year-old Penny Whiteside. The man stated that he and other family members were concerned because they had not been able to reach his sister, and they hadn't heard from her since January 3rd. Police began an investigation, though it appears that the big break in the case didn't come until recently, when they began to receive strange reports from Penny's former neighbors. specifically about her boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, now 54-year-old Sheridan Dirk Fogel. The neighbors stated that Fogel had mentioned burying something in the backyard of an apartment property where they had been living on the 600 block of First Avenue. They also said that there was a fire pit back there that Fogel got very territorial about anytime someone would approach it. On June 12, 2024, authorities obtained a warrant to excavate that fire pit, during which they recovered a wooden box. Inside was human remains, which were later determined to be those of Penny Whiteside. A recent autopsy listed her death as, quote, homicide by unspecified means. Fogel was arrested on August 29th, approximately 140 miles away from the property in the city of Orangeburg. He remains in custody and has now been charged with murder. Though no motive behind the crime has been confirmed at the time of this recording, police say that they had previous reports on file involving the couple. Specifically, Penny had accused Fogel of domestic violence towards her on multiple occasions, and had also alleged that he had stolen her credit and debit cards during a period when they were broken up. The situation is still developing. The family and friends of a 32-year-old Oregon nurse are mourning her devastating loss this week, after she was allegedly murdered just days after getting married. According to reports, 32-year-old Melissa Jubain was in the process of beginning an exciting new chapter of her life. For the past 10 years, she had been in a long-distance relationship with the love of her life, Brian Lontero. But now, they were finally close to being together forever. The couple had met on the Hawaiian island of Oahu, where Brian and his family are from. They fell in love, and for the next decade made trips whenever they could to see one another. On August 24th, 2024, the pair were finally married in a ceremony on the island's north shore. After celebrating with friends and family, Melissa briefly returned home to her apartment in Beaverton, Oregon, which was very close to where she worked as a nurse at St. Vincent Hospital in Portland. Brian, meanwhile, went to stay with Melissa's parents in Washington. The plan was for Melissa to find a new job closer to her parents so that she and Brian could finally live together full-time. Tragically, that would never happen. On September 4th, Brian spoke to Melissa shortly before she was about to head to her morning shift at the hospital. However, he was later notified that she had never arrived. After that, neither he nor any of the 32-year-old's friends and family members were able to get a hold of her. The worried loved ones immediately called police and asked them to conduct a welfare check at Melissa's apartment on Southwest 160th Avenue. They agreed, but when they arrived there, they couldn't find any sign of Melissa. Alarmingly, her purse, wallet, and keys were also missing, even though her car was still in the building's parking garage. A search was launched, one that lasted 3 agonizing days until police released an awful update. On September 7th, they announced that Melissa's remains had been found, and that her neighbor, 27-year-old Bryce Jonathan Schubert, had been arrested for her murder. At the time of this recording, the circumstances and alleged motive behind the crime have not been revealed, though it's been reported that Schubert was also a nurse that worked at a different hospital in the area. He remains in custody and has been charged with second-degree murder. Melissa's family and friends have come out to express their devastation and heartbreak over the news. Speaking on behalf of her son, Brian's mother said in part, quote, "I miss her. I'm so happy Brian met her. I told Brian to always love her. They were happy. Very happy." Representatives from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police say that a woman is facing charges in connection with quite the bizarre and unsettling burglary case this week, after she allegedly broke into a local funeral home and carried off one of their caskets with a body inside. The incident began sometime in the early morning hours of August 27th, when Las Vegas police received a call about a dead body outside of a business. The caller stated that the person was lying face down in front of the Affordable Cremation and Burial Service funeral home, right near the intersection of West Charleston Boulevard and Rancho Drive. When officers arrived at the scene, they found the body as described, though it quickly became clear that the situation was stranger than they ever could have imagined. The body in question was lying in some rocks near the front walkway of the business, and its feet were covered with plastic bags. An empty casket was also found on the nearby sidewalk. Police were soon able to review surveillance footage from the funeral home, which revealed what had happened. The video allegedly showed a woman smashing a front window at the business and then reaching in to unlock a door. The woman had gone on to make a number of trips in and out of the funeral home, including one in which she had dragged the casket containing the body outside. Employees at the funeral home were able to verify that the body had originally been brought there on August 20th. A viewing for the deceased person was held the day before the strange incident. 2 days later, the alleged thief was caught after she was recognized at a local convenience store. She has since been identified as 47-year-old Patricia Sierra. When questioned about the crime, Sierra apparently blamed substance abuse problems, saying that she didn't remember doing it and, quote, blacked out from drinking 6 beers. She was arrested and is now facing charges of grand larceny, burglary of a business, and removing, transforming, or disturbing human remains. Authorities in Crockett County, Tennessee say that they dealt with quite the bizarre situation this week after a reality TV star was bitten by an animal at a local zoo, and they ended up arresting her and a male companion on drug charges. The whole thing began sometime on September 2nd when police were called about a situation at the Tennessee Safari Park in the town of Alamo. They, as well as other emergency responders, were dispatched to the zoo after learning that a female guest there had been bitten by a camel. As weird as this already was, things were about to get even stranger, because according to reports, the victim of this camel bite was 36-year-old reality TV star Amy Slayton Halterman. Slayton Halterman is one of the main characters in the TLC show 1,000 Pound Sisters. The program, which began in 2020, documents the lives of Slayton Halterman and her sister Tammy Slayton, who at the time weighed a combined total of more than 1,000 pounds. When officers arrived at the scene that day, the 36-year-old was immediately tended to, but something else quickly caught their attention. In a subsequent report, they stated, quote, deputies were immediately overtaken by suspicious odors coming from the guest's vehicle. The officers performed a search of Slayton Halterman's vehicle, allegedly recovering both marijuana and magic mushrooms. As a result, after being bandaged up for her camel bite, the 36-year-old was arrested along with her male companion, Brian Scott Lovern. The pair are each now facing charges of possession of a Schedule I drug, illegal possession of a Schedule VI drug, and 2 counts of child endangerment, since Slayton Halterman's 2 young boys were with them at the time. According to reports, the boys were later picked up by the 36-year-old's sister/co-star. Representatives from the Chicago police say that a 30-year-old man is facing multiple murder charges this week after he allegedly shot and killed 4 people aboard a subway train in what is thought to be a chilling act of random violence. The incident began at around 5:30 a.m. on September 2nd, when employees with the Chicago Transit Authority's Blue Line made an awful discovery. After one of the system's L trains pulled into its final stop at Forest Park Station, they found 4 people inside that were suffering from gunshot wounds. 3 of those people were pronounced dead almost immediately after first responders arrived, while the 4th sadly succumbed to his injuries after being taken to a local hospital. So far, only 3 of the victims have been named: 60-year-old Adrian Collins, 28-year-old Simeon Bahesi, and 64-year-old Margaret Miller. The 4th victim is said to be a man in his 50s. After reviewing surveillance video aboard the train, authorities quickly pieced together the disturbing events. According to those who spoke to local media, the footage shows a man, later identified as 30-year-old Ronnie S. Davis, boarding the Blue Line at Harlem Station. Armed with a handgun, Davis allegedly goes on to shoot each of the victims at close range. 3 of the victims were seated separately on one car, while the 4th was on a separate car further down the train. Reports state that most of the victims were asleep when they were attacked and had no discernible interaction with Davis beforehand. Instead, he allegedly walked up to each of them and fired. The 30-year-old was found roughly 90 minutes after the awful discovery while on a Pink Line train. At the time, he was still reportedly in possession of the gun used in the crime. At the time of this recording, no motive has been revealed behind the quadruple murder, and police say that they believe the killings were carried out completely at random. It's been reported that Davis has training in security and home health care and has a history of criminal activity, but no convictions. Davis has now been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and remains in custody. The situation is still under investigation. A Georgia community has been left devastated and reeling this week following a shooting at a local high school that took the lives of 4 people and wounded at least 9 others. The incident began at around 10:20 a.m. on September 4th, when police in the city of Winder received reports of an active shooter at Appalachia High School. Moments earlier, a 14-year-old student at the school, later identified as Colt Gray, allegedly opened fire on fellow classmates and teachers. According to witnesses, the attack happened during the middle of second period, about 2 hours into the school day. At some point, Gray reportedly left his math class before returning with a rifle. He knocked at the classroom door, which had automatically locked as part of the school's safety protocols. A female student in the class got up to let him back inside, only to realize to her horror that he was carrying a weapon. She did not open the door, and as she, her classmates, and their teacher ran to get to the back of the room, they started hearing shots out in the hall. For the next several minutes, all of those in the building scrambled to initiate lockdown procedures. However, sadly, not all would make it to safety. 4 people were killed, while a further 9 were injured. Of the wounded, 7 also suffered gunshot wounds. The terrifying situation came to an end almost immediately after police arrived at the scene. When Gray was confronted by local law enforcement and school resource officers, he reportedly got down on the ground and was taken into custody. The 4 deceased victims have since been identified as 2 14-year-old students, Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angelo, as well as 2 teachers, 53-year-old Christina Ermy and 39-year-old Richard Aspinwall. The 9 injured victims have been identified only as 8 students and 1 teacher, and it's been said that all are expected to make a full recovery. In the days since the tragedy, law enforcement has come out to recognize the bravery of the victims, many of whom risked their lives to try and save others. Many of the teachers and staff at the high school were praised for doing everything they could to protect their students, including Richard Aspinwall, who was reportedly shot twice while trying to make sure everything was okay. His students pulled him back into the classroom after he was injured and used their own clothes to try and slow his bleeding. However, sadly, they were unable to save his life. At the same time, police said that the school's security protocols likely stopped additional people from being killed. These features include the previously mentioned locking doors, a new alarm system, and a device that allowed faculty to alert authorities to the shooting at the press of a button. As for the alleged shooter, Colt Gray, he is now facing charges, including 4 counts of murder, with additional charges expected to follow. A number of details that paint a complicated picture of the teen's upbringing and home life have also started to emerge in the last few days. According to reports, the 14-year-old's parents, Marcy Gray and Colin Gray, had recently separated after an extremely troubled marriage. Both had accused each other of domestic violence and other crimes, with Marcy in particular saying that she had suffered years of physical abuse at the hands of her former husband. That being said, Marcy herself reportedly has an extensive criminal history, including numerous arrests for drug-related offenses, theft, and other charges. After splitting up, Gray continued to live with his father, while his younger siblings lived with their mother. In the days after this week's incident, it was announced that Colin Gray was also facing charges in connection with the shooting. These include multiple counts of second-degree murder, 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. Investigators have stated that the charges were brought against Colin Gray for, quote, providing a firearm to Colt Gray with knowledge that he was a threat to himself and others. This reportedly relates to the fact that Colin bought his son a firearm for Christmas just months after he was investigated for troubling online behavior in May of 2023. This behavior allegedly included threats to commit a school shooting just like this week's attack. Police reportedly investigated this at the time, though they say that they couldn't conclusively link the then 13-year-old to the online activity and that there was not enough evidence to place him under arrest. It's been further alleged that Colt Gray had a fascination with similar shooting attacks at schools, including the 2018 Parkland shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High in Florida. At the time of this recording, it appears that investigators are continuing to wade through a massive amount of additional information and evidence surrounding the case. Among this are claims by Marcy Gray and other family members that she called and tried to warn a school counselor at Appalachia High School about an unspecified, quote, extreme emergency, roughly 30 minutes prior to the shooting. She apparently did this after receiving a disturbing text message from the suspect stating, quote, I'm sorry, Mom. However, it's unclear what was done between the time of this alleged call and the first shots being fired. Currently, the situation is still developing, and more information is expected to be released in the coming days. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.